The applause hit like thunder. Cameras flashed from every corner of the auditorium, their light cutting through the haze and heat. My palms were dry now, not shaking, not anymore. 84% market share, I said into the microphone. 99.99% uptime. The screens behind me burned with those numbers, proof that my company, Nimbus Edge, had redefined the industry. I heard gasps ripple across the crowd. Front row investors whispered to each other, stunned. And right there among them, his face half hidden by the glare, sat Charles Morton, my former boss, the man who'd once smirked across a boardroom table and said my proposal was garbage. 2 years ago, I was nobody. Tonight, he was the one sitting still, eyes locked on me like a man watching his own house burn. I paused just long enough for silence to settle, the kind of silence that makes an audience lean forward. When I brought this idea to my old company, I said evenly, I was told it would never work, that I was naive, that clients didn't need innovation. I let my gaze find Charles. Apparently, they changed their minds. A soft laugh rippled through the hall. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Then I leaned closer to the mic, my voice low, deliberate. Funny thing about innovation, I said, it doesn't ask for permission. The words landed like a spark in dry grass. Applause exploded, sharp and uncontrollable. I felt the stage vibrate beneath my heels. Reporters shouted my name. Flashes burst white. Charles didn't clap. His lips pressed into a thin line as he rose and slipped toward the exit, his shoulders bowed. For a moment, I watched him go, the roar of the audience breaking like waves behind me, and then the sound shifted from applause to memory, the click of fluorescent lights, the creak of his leather chair, the soft thud of my printed proposal hitting the bottom of a trash bin. That's where this really began 2 years ago, in a glass office overlooking downtown Austin, when the man who's now begging to merge called my dream worthless. 2 years earlier, the conference room on the 32nd floor of Morton Systems smelled like polished wood and burnt coffee, the kind of place where ideas went to die quietly. I stood at the head of the table, my laptop open, my slides bright with graphs and projections. If we migrate our core infrastructure to a hybrid cloud model, I said, we can reduce downtime by 60% within the first quarter, and Charles Morton cut me off with a dry laugh. Clara, you've always been a solid developer, he said, leaning back in his chair. But this, he waved a hand at the screen. This is tech jargon wrapped in fantasy. Cloud integration, automation, scaling. Our clients aren't asking for buzzwords. The other managers shifted uncomfortably. I could see one of them, Derek from finance, hiding a smirk behind his coffee cup. I forced a calm breath. It's not a buzzword, I replied. It's the direction the market's moving. Oracle, SAP, even mid-tier firms are transitioning enough. Charles's voice cracked like a whip. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. You're here to maintain our legacy systems, not reinvent them. Stick to what you're good at. He closed his laptop and walked toward the door. As he passed, he picked up my printed proposal, crumpled it, and tossed it into the metal bin beside the table. The sound of paper hitting the bottom echoed louder than it should have. When the door shut, the room emptied quickly. No one looked at me. No one ever did when Charles decided a meeting was over. I stayed frozen for a moment, staring at that bin. My pulse buzzed in my ears, a mix of anger and humiliation twisting together until it burned. Then I knelt, retrieved the wrinkled pages, and smoothed them flat against the table. The ink was still sharp, the diagrams clear. My idea was still mine. Back at my cubicle, I plugged in a flash drive and copied every line of code, every diagram, every note I'd written. My hands shook, but my decision didn't. If Morton Systems didn't want the future, I'd build it elsewhere. By late afternoon, the office air felt different too still, too polite. People whispered near the elevators, glancing toward the conference room where the blinds had been drawn. An email pinged across every desk at 3:47 p.m. Mandatory staff meeting, 4:00 sharp. I knew before I opened it. Inside the glass-walled room, Charles stood beside two HR representatives in neat gray blazers. His smile was thin, professional, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. As part of a strategic restructuring, he began, Morton Systems will be optimizing departments to meet evolving market conditions. He said it like a news anchor reading someone else's tragedy. Names were called one by one. Mine came third. I felt a few sympathetic glances, none held long enough to matter. When I looked toward Lena, the UX lead who'd once helped me refine my model, she mouthed, "I'm sorry," before lowering her eyes. HR handed me a beige envelope, severance details printed in polite type. Charles didn't speak again, but I felt his gaze as I packed up my desk. 3 years of notebooks, code samples, and half-drunk mugs of ambition reduced to a single cardboard box. "Please return your badge at the front desk," one of the HR women said softly, like she was tucking a child in for the last time. The automatic doors hissed open, and Austin's heavy evening heat wrapped around me. Clouds gathered above the skyline, their edges bruised violet. Thunder rumbled somewhere over the river, rolling low and steady. I sat in my car for a long time, the envelope unopened in my lap. Behind me, the mirrored windows of Morton Systems caught a flash of lightning. For a split second, I saw my own reflection, a woman erased from her own creation. When I finally drove home, the storm broke. Rain streaked across the windshield, blurring the city lights into smeared gold. Inside my apartment, I placed the box on the table, opened my laptop, and found the saved file, Nimbus Core Prototype V2.1. I stared at the name, at the future still glowing faintly on the screen, and whispered, "Then I'll build it myself." The first month after Morton felt endless, I woke up each day to the same silence, the kind that hums around cheap apartment walls when no one's waiting for you to get somewhere. My new office was a second-hand desk wedged between the kitchen counter and a window that looked over Lady Bird Lake. The blinds rattled each time the wind came off the water, but I kept them open anyway. It reminded me there was still movement outside my four walls. By day, I sent out resumes that went unanswered. By night, I coded. I built until my fingers cramped, until the room filled with the blue glow of a screen and the faint scent of burnt coffee. My savings dwindled faster than I'd planned: rent, health insurance, student loans. One evening, a red notice from the electric company slid under my door. Final reminder. I folded it in half and set it beneath my keyboard. The power couldn't go out. Not yet. I barely slept. Every time exhaustion pressed in, I imagined Charles's voice calling my work fantasy, and it kept me upright. I refined the architecture, rewrote the load balancer, mapped the interface into something even a non-tech CEO could grasp. Then, one night, around 2 a.m., a message popped up on my screen. "Marcus Lee, is this you pushing commits on GitHub at 2 a.m.? I blinked, smiled weakly, and typed back, "Apparently, yes." He called seconds later, his voice sharp but amused. "You're still building Nimbus Core, aren't you? It's just an experiment." He laughed. "Clara, I've seen your commits. That's not an experiment. That's a foundation." The next day, he drove up from Houston. Marcus had been my college friend at UT, now a partner at a venture firm. He sat at my cluttered kitchen table, scrolling through my prototype. "This could scale," he said. "It's rough, but it's real. I'll front you $250,000 seed round if you deliver a working MVP in 90 days. 90 days. I nodded before fear could catch up. When he left, I stared at the contract on the table. The apartment was dark except for the screen's reflection. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt alive. The deadline arrived like a storm on the horizon, loud, fast, and impossible to ignore. 90 days after Marcus signed the check, I was sitting in a borrowed conference room at a mid-sized manufacturing firm called Kenton Industrial, watching lines of code crawl across a progress bar. Their CIO, a sharp woman named Aisha Grant, stood with her arms crossed, waiting for my prototype to prove itself. If Nimbus Core's migration tool worked, Kenton would be my first real client. If it failed, I'd lose not only the contract but Marcus's faith and maybe the company before it ever started. 43 minutes, I whispered, staring at the timer on my screen. The final confirmation light blinked green. The room went still. Servers that had once taken days to migrate were now running flawlessly in less than an hour. Aisha looked up from her laptop. That's faster than anything we've ever tested. I nodded, but my stomach stayed tight. The moment she stepped out to call her team, I noticed it the slightest flicker in the data stream. The database replication wasn't syncing. A mismatch, then another. Within seconds, red errors flooded the console. My chest seized. If I didn't stop the process, their live data could corrupt before the system even went live. I froze the migration, tracing lines of code through a fog of panic. Somewhere in the concurrency handler, a single timestamp error had undone weeks of work. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "You really should have built a rollback buffer." I turned. Lena Morales stood in the doorway, arms folded, a faint smile on her face. She looked exactly the same, confident, unshakable. The UX lead who'd once defended me in Morton's boardroom. "How did you Marcus called me?" she said. "He thought you could use another set of eyes. We worked through the night, side by side like the old days." By dawn, the system was stable, clean, alive again. Aisha signed the contract that morning, and when she shook my hand, I finally exhaled. The migration had taken 47 minutes. The recovery had taken everything else. But Nimbus Core was real now, no longer a dream, but a living system breathing under its own code. 3 months later, success felt heavier than failure ever had. Kenton Industrial's contract had opened doors, and suddenly, Nimbus Core, now rebranded as Nimbus Edge, was being mentioned in the same breath as companies I used to admire from the sidelines. Then came the biggest chance yet, a demo for RetailWorks, a national chain with 5,000 stores and a notoriously cautious board. The night before the presentation, I barely slept. By noon the next day, our platform was live. Our data migration running smooth across their sandbox servers. Cameras flashed. Executives murmured approval, and then, mid-sentence, the dashboard froze. The colors on the screen shifted from green to red, one tile at a time. Connection lost. Data streams collapsing. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Did it crash?" one of the RetailWorks engineers asked. I forced a smile I didn't feel. "We're investigating." But inside, everything went cold. Within an hour, the demo was over. Within 12, the headlines began: "Startup Nimbus Edge faces major failure during RetailWorks trial. Former Morton engineer accused of copying proprietary IP." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Morton's legal department had fed the story to the press. They were coming for me now. By midnight, Marcus was on the phone. His tone was sharp, stripped of warmth. "Clara, we can't afford this kind of exposure. If you don't have a fix in 48 hours, I'm freezing the next round." The call ended. The silence afterward was suffocating. Lena tried to convince me to rest, but I couldn't. I locked myself in the office, pulled up the kernel, and started over. For 36 hours straight, I worked without stopping. No music, no light, just the hum of the servers and the sting of caffeine. Somewhere around dawn, I found a thread leak in the parallel sync queue, an error so small it hid beneath the logs. I rewrote the section line by line, patched, deployed, and waited. When the green light returned, steady and solid, I finally leaned back. By morning, the new version went live. The press reversed their story. Marcus called again, quieter this time. "You did it." I didn't answer. I just looked at the empty coffee cups on my desk and thought about what belief costs when it's yours alone to carry. The morning the deal went through, Austin was drenched in sunlight, sharp and golden, the kind that makes glass buildings look like they're burning. I watched the city rise through my windshield as Lena read the email out loud, her voice trembling just enough to betray what we both felt. Becker Industries has signed full migration, 3-year contract. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Becker wasn't just another client, they were Morton Systems' crown jewel, the account Charles had boasted about in every investor meeting. Lena leaned back, laughing softly. You realize this means we just took their biggest client. I nodded, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. The irony hit like static 2 years ago. I'd begged Charles to let me pilot the same migration Becker had requested. He'd said it was impossible, that their data structure was too old, too risky. And now Becker's CTO had just signed with me. By the time we reached the office, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing journalists, analysts, even former co-workers from Morton. The local tech paper's headline flashed on the lobby screen, Nimbus Edge completes fastest enterprise migration in Texas. Tech history 47 minutes end to end. The number felt almost unreal. For everyone else, it was proof of success. For me, it was vindication coded into time itself. That afternoon, Marcus came by with champagne and that half-cocked grin of his. Stock alert, he said, flipping his phone toward me. Morton Systems down 30%. I stared at the numbers, the same color red that had once haunted my own console during failure. Guess they finally noticed, Lena murmured. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Instead, I found myself driving north along Congress Avenue toward the glass tower that still bore Morton's name. The building looked smaller now, more fragile, in the reflection of its tinted windows. I saw the outline of my own car glide past once an employee inside, now a shadow outside, free. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just distance. The kind that meant I'd already moved on while they were still standing still. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind that starts too quiet to stay that way. The office was humming with low conversation, the soft rhythm of keyboards and coffee machines. When my assistant's voice came through the intercom, Clara, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says you'll want to hear him out. I was halfway through an email when I looked up and saw him through the glass door. Charles Morton. He looked smaller than I remembered. Though maybe it was just the space. Nimbus Edge's office was bright, open, filled with sunlight and green walls of glass, the opposite of his mahogany fortress on the 32nd floor. He stepped inside slowly, adjusting his cufflinks, every movement rehearsed to look confident. Clara, he began, his voice even. It's been a while. 2 years, I said. Not that anyone's counting. He smiled thinly and glanced around. You've built something impressive. I'll admit that. He set a folder on my desk. That's why I'm here. Morton Systems believes there may be opportunities for collaboration. I leaned back. Collaboration, he nodded. A merger, of sorts. Synergy. Your platform, our client network. We could rebuild together combined strengths. The word together landed like a lie between us. I studied him for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until he shifted in his chair. You called this idea garbage, I said quietly. Remember that his jaw tightened. I was wrong. I opened the folder. Financial projections, investor letters, desperate optimism disguised as strategy. I slid it back toward him. You want me to merge with what I've already replaced? He blinked. You're not even going to consider it. I already did. I said, 2 years ago, when you threw my proposal in the trash, for a moment. His expression cracked something human, regretful, but it passed quickly. He stood, smoothing his tie, and forced a polite nod. Then, I wish you luck. Clara. He turned and walked out, shoulders rigid, the echo of his shoes fading down the hallway. When the door closed, the office felt warmer. Lighter, as if something had finally been released. The stage lights felt hotter this time. I'd stood under them before, but tonight was different. This wasn't just a keynote. It was the moment I'd been building toward since the day a crumpled proposal hit a metal bin. The global tech forum pulsed with energy. Reporters lined the aisles. Executives whispered in clusters. Cameras floated on gimbals overhead. Behind me, the massive LED screens flashed the words, Nimbus Edge, active in 22 countries, 84% market share, 99.99% uptime. I took the podium and let the applause fade. 2 years ago, I began. I was told that enterprise clients would never leave their legacy systems. That cloud integration was a phase. That vision was a risk, not a roadmap. The audience leaned in. I continued, my voice steady. Today, that same vision powers companies across 4 continents. It's no longer about proving someone wrong, it's about proving what's possible. Flashes went off. Hands rose. I scanned the front rows and saw him. Charles Morton sat near the aisle, shoulders drawn tight, his name badge turned backward. For a moment, the noise around me dulled. When the Q&A began, he stood. Miss Wynne, he said, his voice carrying through the room, is it true that this architecture, the foundation of Nimbus Edge, was originally proposed at Morton Systems? The audience hushed. I met his gaze. Before I could speak, he added, because if it is, then I'm the man who threw it away. The silence was absolute. Cameras zoomed in. I could have humiliated him, but instead I nodded once. Then I'm grateful you did, I said. It gave me the freedom to build it right. Later, backstage, he found me alone. Gone was the practiced authority. He looked older, gentler. Clara, he said quietly, not a merger, just a partnership. Let Morton help other companies make the leap I was too afraid to take. I studied him for a long moment, the weight between us shifting. Then we do it my way, I said. He exhaled, relieved. Your way it is. For the first time in years, we shook hands not as rivals, but as 2 people finally on the same side of change. 6 months later, the partnership was no longer a headline, it was a rhythm. Morton Systems, once the giant that dismissed me, now carried a new title, Nimbus Edge Certified Implementation Partner. Their logo sat beneath ours on the website, smaller, quieter, but still there. Every week, reports came in from their team's migrations completed, systems modernized, clients moved to cloud environments they'd once been too afraid to touch, and at the center of every rollout, Morton's engineers followed our playbooks, our standards, our philosophy. Charles had stepped down from the CEO role soon after the forum. He took on a quieter position, leading their transition unit under our guidelines. He never asked for attention. Maybe that was his way of apology. Sometimes, he sent me progress notes, short, factual, respectful. Once, at the bottom of a spreadsheet, he wrote, "Thank you for showing me what I couldn't see." One evening, after everyone had left, I stood by my office window overlooking downtown Austin. The skyline shimmered against the water, and for the first time, I felt something like peace. My desk was lined with awards and project milestones, but one object stood out, a small metal waste bin polished to silver. The same one from the day I'd been fired. Beside it hung a framed inscription in brushed steel letters, "Innovation doesn't ask permission." I ran my fingers across the words, remembering how that phrase had first come to me not as a statement, but as defiance. Now it felt like truth. Lena poked her head through the door, smiling. "Becker just renewed for another 3 years," she said, "and Marcus wants to raise a new round. Looks like we're scaling again." I smiled back. "Then let's make sure we do it right." When she left, I looked once more at the bin, gleaming softly in the lamplight, and couldn't help but laugh. He'd thrown my idea away. I'd built it, refined it, and turned it into something the world couldn't ignore. In the end, Charles Morton had sold me back my own idea, and I bought it at market price.